Hey, Earthlings, welcome to Still Alive. So, if you tuned into the Animal Rights Show yesterday and saw the chaos, this is going to be worse, I think.
It's bound to be, isn't it? It's bound to be with me here.
but for good reasons, in a way, because we've got so much stuff, it's going to be difficult to get through it all, but we'll see. Let me do my usual kind of housekeeping, as I call it. So, this has been streamed to 3 different places, and the best place to engage with the chat is going to be on my YouTube channel. And then in relation to that, we don't charge, things like super chats, all that kind of stuff. Don't believe in it. So just chat away, and we'll put your contributions on the screen. Should they be good enough? I always say, don't I? So there is that. So we've got a few in the house. So I think Deb was, is Deb back? Hi, Deb. You said you're having Wi-Fi problems, but it's okay now, I think. Michael, still alive again. How can it be? Yeah, it's a good question, isn't it? So how can it be, Ronnie?
Well, I think some people might have been wondering whether we were still alive, because it's been quite some while. I think we've both been busy with other things, so that's the reason it's a while since the last show, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess so. Carolyn Harris is in the house. Welcome, Carolyn. Right. Okay. Now, one thing I didn't tell you, Ronnie, is I've prepared about a 2-minute intro opening statement that I want to read, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, boss. But the first question is, we're still alive, aren't we, Ronnie?
I think just about.
Yeah. Good. Quite good opening titles, those, Ronnie. When you haven't seen them for a while, you always think, "Oh, that's interesting," don't you?
Yeah. Yes, it brings back memories, doesn't it?
Brings back memories of our weekly shows.
Yes, yeah. Well, and also stuff we've done in the outside world, and which we're continuing to do, aren't I? All that similar type of stuff to what's shown on there.
We're too old, frail, and everything else to do weekly ones.
Well, we're still out there though, and that's and there's a lot of people less frail than us that don't do F all. So get out there and do some outreach, everyone.
Yes. Okay. Well, you usually say that at the end of the show, Ronnie, but
I put it in early.
Yeah, you must say it. You'll do it at the other side as well. Okay. So, all right. Let me try and set the scene then. It's no exaggeration to say that we're living in a different world to the one of 2 months ago. As animal rights advocates, as animal liberationists, Ronnie and I are interested, concerned, you could say, about what the impact of Trump's second administration will have on our fellow animals. And this may not be a short-term issue in 2 senses. For example, Trump seems very serious. He's seriously tempted to stay in power beyond what is constitutionally normal in the USA. And also the rate and scale of the changes and the devastation that's going on may take years to remedy, especially perhaps, Ronnie, the bit that you want to concentrate on, which is the environment.
Yes.
Now, some animal advocates are arguing that the Trump presidency will be a good thing for our fellow animals, although some of the most vocal in that regard seem to be pretty remarkably quiet right at the moment. Since the first Trump presidency, some animal advocates have encouraged vegans to vote for Trump, usually for reasons that will be classed as animal welfare reasons, at least by me. However, as we're about to see, the language that gets used is often confused and confusing. So that's one of the things that I want to concentrate on, reflecting the wider language issues in the animal movement in general. So Ronnie and I are going to run through 2 or 3 very short videos and probably comment on them as we go. And we also have a host of media reports to rely on as well. So that's my statement. And it's the media reports that are going to create the problems, Ronnie, because we had about 20, didn't we? And just finding them was bad enough. So
there's loads of articles sort of referencing Trump and his effects, or the effects of his administration on our fellow animals. And of course, it's kind of, we wouldn't be able to feature them all, so it's a question of choosing which ones we thought would be the most relevant, and that wasn't particularly easy, was it?
No, it wasn't. Okay, so shall we start with our first video? So the first video is about 2 of the people who have been encouraging people to vote for Trump, and also the fact that at the beginning of the administration, they had a vegetarian who was part of the Doge thing with Elon Musk, but apparently he was fired on the first day, so he didn't last too long. But there are some other people with kind of what you might call animal welfare or animal related issues still in the administration, and Ronnie's going to concentrate on one, I think probably our first news item. So let's get on with that and see if this again will kind of set the seal for what we're about to do.
Time I can remember in history, a big part of the election campaign having the rhetoric that the Republicans was the party for people who care about animals.
Yeah.
This is the party you vote for. If you care about the state breaking into your house and killing your animals, Republican is the party for you. That's
the first bit I couldn't quite understand that, Ronnie. If you care about the state breaking in to your house and killing your animal, then the Republican is the vote for you. What's all that about? Do you know?
Well, unless something happened under the Democrat administration where that occurred, I would imagine the state would break into someone's house and kill their animals, whether that was Democrat or Republican, depending on the.
Seems a bit likely. If anybody knows what that was about, Debbie's saying the Rocky Squirrel event. Okay, yeah, all right then. So, yeah, all right. Well, we might be able to fill that gap in a little later then.
The first time I'd ever seen that. Before, it's very much been the idea pushed mainly by people on the left, obviously, that, the left party is the party you vote for if you care about animals. You're not vegan if you vote right wing. And this was the first election where that tipped the other way around, sort of.
Yeah. So in calling out hypocrisy, I agree with you that it's progress, moral progress of the Republican movement. I think it's something we really need to capitalize on and keep pushing this idea that animal rights is not just a leftist thing. And I think we mentioned recently Vivek Ramsawardhy. I don't know if I said that correctly, his surname, but he also posted on Twitter recently that soon, eventually, conservatives will start taking animal cruelty seriously. And we can count him in on that. I did comment saying, can you say rights instead of cruelty? Because it came up a bit well.
Yeah, so that's the first language issue. Because
I mean, I'd like to comment on this idea that it is true that in general, left-wing parties are better on animal protection than right-wing parties. If we look around the world at the policies of the various parties, it's the parties more to the left that do have better policies on animal protection, aren't they? Or like those policies go nowhere as far as we'd like them to go. For instance, here in the UK, which party in the UK Parliament is the most left wing? So the most left wing in terms of its policies on social justice and its economic policies. by a long way, that's the Green Party. The Green Party who now have 4 MPs. And the Green Party also has by far the best policies on animal protection. I mean, I know that because for a few years I was involved in the policy making team within the Green Party that kind of created some of those policies for our fellow animals. So certainly in the UK, the most left-wing party in the UK Parliament has by far the best policies in relation to our fellow animals. The Green Party would totally abolish animal experimentation. It would move the country towards plant-based agriculture. Would end zoos, would end zoos, well, and safari parks, turn them into wildlife refuges, etc., etc., etc. So certainly in the UK, that is the case, and I would imagine that mostly throughout the world that is the case as well. Left-wing parties do have, in general, better policies for our fellow animals.
Yeah, well, the language of left and right, I wanted to touch on as well. But in terms of what you've just said, Ronnie, that means that as the Labour Party have moved to the right, the Green Party moved to the left, or stayed where it was, or?
I think they've stayed. They've always been considerably left of Labour. Not so far left when Jeremy Corbyn, in terms of Jeremy Corbyn's policies and views, but they've always been, I would say, the most left-wing party in the UK Parliament. They've always been, in terms of their policies on, if we're talking about, policies in terms of human rights and policies in terms of economics, then yes, they're by far the most left-wing party in the UK Parliament.
Yeah, I suppose the debate is always the usual one about, well, what's the point when you talk about a party that will never get into power? But I suppose they would as a coalition.
I think they may have a bit more chance of gaining seats now that I think there's going to be people defecting from Labour because Labour have moved to the right, and all the really terrible policies that Labour are bringing to attack the people with disabilities, and they're refusing to tax the rich properly and stuff like that. And I think so there's going to be.
What about the 2 big British parties, Ronnie? I mean, in other words, is Labour any good at all with animal welfare? Because it's not going to be animal rights, we know. And also with the Tories, are they still wanting to bring hunting back and that kind of stuff?
It kind of wouldn't. It wouldn't surprise me. I think there's some talk within Labour of strengthening the Hunting Act, which would obviously be good. I don't know very much apart from that.
Is that just taking a couple of the loopholes out?
I think we'd have to see what actually happened with that. Apart from that, I don't really know of anything else with regard to the Labour Party. Reform UK would totally legalise hunting. That's one of their policies. Nigel Farage is a big hunt supporter. For all the people on here that might be listening who are tempted to vote for Reform UK. Of course,
Michael Farage in his garage, yeah.
That's right. And of course, they're climate change deniers. And as we know, the climate crisis is a major killer of our fellow animals.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's go back to the other side of the pond and continue with this.
And I really like to avoid that, but any kind of normalization of animals and animal rights in the conservative movement, I think, is a really great thing for the world.
Yeah, let's talk about Vivek. So Vivek Ramaswamy, he is a vegetarian for ethical reasons. I know we as vegans, we kind of cringe at that term, but I can only assume he hasn't been preached to about the egg industry and the dairy industry and the wool industry and all that kind of stuff. He might not have.
That really rankled with me when I first heard it, because I hate this idea that we preach to people. I mean, I don't see vegan education as preaching myself.
I think if you preach to people, you're liable to send them running the other way. People have got to come to their own decision and think they've come to their own decision to become vegan. It's a philosophy.
Yeah, it's a distasteful kind of phrase, isn't it?
Preaching is not the encourage people to become vegan, educate them to become vegan, give them the information so that they can decide to become vegan. Those are much better words to use.
Odd word to use. Yeah.
Come across that stuff, I don't know. But he has literally written on Elon Musk's own platform X recently that he believes it is unethical to murder sentient animals for culinary pleasure. Now, we know this guy's not perfect. He's not vegan. And we know that ultimately he's a politician and he's not going to mandate, animal rights, as it were. And this is just going to be impossible. That would, we can't be naive and think that anything massively is going to change.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, something significant has happened. This guy who believes it's wrong to kill animals for food has been called a great American patriot by Donald Trump and appointed in a key leadership role alongside Elon Musk in Trump's government. Now, this is, again, let's not be naive. This won't end the animal holocaust. This won't massively change anything at all.
It matters, though. It absolutely matters.
It matters. It puts the cat amongst the pigeons. Now, Vivek is going to be at the dinner table with Donald Trump, Elon Musk, all these influential people. And Trump will say, so Vivek, why is it that you haven't got the Trump steak on your plate and instead you've gone with the bean burrito or whatever? Yeah. And Vivek is going to reply, because I believe it's wrong to kill animals for food. And a conversation is going to start among all these powerful people. Most people may think about.
Yeah, do you buy that the fact that you've got a vegetarian at the table is going to make any difference?
I mean, it possibly may do, but he's no longer there, is he? That guy? I think Trump sacked him.
Yeah, I think it might have been his first day. So all that talk about this guy who's vegetarian, cares about our fellow animals, has really come to nothing, because the guy isn't there anymore. He's not. But what I'm saying, Ronnie, is for weeks, a lot of people were saying because of this guy, this is the reason why animal advocates should vote for Trump.
Yeah, I mean, but let's look at alongside Elon Musk, whose company carries out the most horrendous experiments on monkeys. Horrendous. Elon Musk, So how is Elon Musk a guy that's, someone who cares about our fellow animals? No.
Yeah. Well, I mean, everything really. I mean, like I picked up on the fact that he's a vegetarian, but he's opposed to the killing of sentient life, which obviously isn't true, right? So that, and
he must know about. If he's a vegetarian, he must know about veganism. It'd be very hard to believe that he's not aware of what happens in the egg industry and the dairy industry. To be quite safe, because I find that kind of quite difficult to believe, really. As well. So why hasn't he become vegan? But he's kind of not there anyway, so it's irrelevant. But there's another guy who is part of the Trump administration, the Health Secretary Kennedy, and I think you believe we got an article about him.
Yeah. Would you want to bring that up now, or do you want to
bring that up now, because I think
it's
sort of relevant now.
All right, give me a bit of time then, since you spring this on me. Lammy, can you remember? Oh yeah, we had loads of trouble getting these up in the first place, and now, of course, just finding them is going to be a pain.
There's quite a few. Hopefully, people will be. It's worth waiting for. I assure you.
Let me remove that one and then put this one back.
Yeah.
So this is the one you're talking about, right?
This is an article, and it's to do with seed oils. The oils that all us vegans use for cooking. The rapeseed oil and the soya and all the vegetable oils we use. Now RFK is claiming that they're harmful and that we should cook things in lard instead and cook things in animal fat instead. This is Trump's health secretary who is promoting the consumption of animal products and is decrying the consumption of vegan-friendly products. And of course, scientifically, what he's saying is like a total load of nonsense. Like I think a lot of the things he says are a total load of nonsense scientifically. And this article, has a lot of nutritionists further down criticising what RFK has said. But there we go. There's a guy that's like promoting, dissing, a very important part of the vegan diet and promoting the consumption of animal products. A guy who's been appointed as health secretary by Trump.
So this is based on this notion that they have about what's natural and what's not, isn't it?
Yeah, and like as if the animals that are farmed today and produce these animal fats are that is in any way natural.
He's not doing very well for the Kennedy brand, really. Has said that the population have been unknowingly poisoned by seed oils and urged people to revert to traditional fats.
When you consider the huge amount of health problems caused to humans through the consumption of animal fats, hardening of the arteries, heart disease, cancer, and all these things that have been associated scientifically with the consumption of animal fats. I mean, this guy is like, he's kind of anti-science, isn't he?
Mm. And is there anything below that you need to go to, Ronnie? Or
not really, because it's just towards the end of the article, it's just about various nutritionists criticising what RFK has said. But here's a guy appointed by Trump, pro the consumption of animal products, opposed to the consumption and a very important part of the vegan diet. John is saying that Musk has recently left Doge. I think he's had to give up his room in the giving up his room
as a traditionally left-wing issue. But you've made reference to this
right. So this is the Vivek guy. Now this is an interesting one, right? Because this is where the language is all over the place. And this is a major problem because, as we know, people are very confused about welfare and rights, or welfare and liberation, not least the people in the movement. And as we see here, what tends to happen now in this total discourse is that these two words are just being used as though they mean the same thing, which they don't. And so this is the guy who was in there originally and then got fired, and he does actually use the language of animal rights. But then listen, because he's playing the role of the interviewer in this one. Then listen to what the guest says.
Being more of an issue of bipartisan concern than people might appreciate. Tell me more about what you think is the conservative case for concern about animal rights.
Conservatives have always opposed animal cruelty. We've had animal cruelty laws almost since the founding. In recent times, factory farming lobby came along and created exemptions. They said, we know we're violating the animal cruelty laws, but we're going to create some exemptions. On your point of conservative support, the strongest federal law we have, the Humane Slaughter Act, was signed into law by President Eisenhower. More recently, Tucker Carlson has said that he dislikes the way factory farms treat animals. Joe Rogan has talked about this on his podcast.
Now you'll recognize this person, Ronnie. She has 3 videos attacking you on her website.
And I've not seen any of them, to be quite honest.
No. Okay. And she's also got one saying that left-wing people can't be vegans. And then this one is entitled...
Then I can't be a vegan, can I, for some reason?
This is vegan reasons to vote for Trump. This is only about a minute now.
The fourth thing that Trump did was actually prevented horses from being slaughtered by minimizing the number of horses that people could buy. And this reduces the number of kill buyers, people who buy horses in order to kill them, from actually buying horses.
Now, I don't know where the logic of that comes in.
It's kind of bizarre. I don't really understand it.
Yeah,
I don't really understand it.
I mean, this is what we would normally call the kind of knacker trade and all that. Remember, back in the 50s and 60s and 70s, and so people will go round and they will buy horses for slaughter. I mean, there's a horse.
But does it really mean that those horses will end up not being killed, because like if you've got industries that use horses, like horse racing and these other things, then when horses are surplus to requirements of those industries, either if they're not good enough in the first place or when their so-called racing careers come to an end, they're going to be killed. Those horses are going to be killed anyway, aren't they? Somehow, in the way our system operates, the way our species society operates, those animals are going to end up killing.
Well, the argument
anyway, aren't
is,
they? You've got to tackle
this is talking about Trump 1, not right now.
Yeah.
The argument is that Trump put a limit on the amount of horses you can buy, presumably at any given time or something, and that they think is going to cut down the number of horses who end up getting killed. It doesn't even make any sense.
It would only work if it limited the number of horses that were bred in the first place, because the situation in the USA and over here in the UK, throughout the world, is that almost all horses that are bred end up being slaughtered at some stage of their life. So the fewer that are bred, the fewer end up being killed, don't they?
Yeah, but there's just a simple way around it. I mean, if you normally buy 20, you just get 2 people to buy 10 each, don't you?
Yeah. So it doesn't. This is the kind of difference this would make would be very minor anyway, to be honest, in the scheme of things. Okay,
there's a couple of seconds later, and again the same problem of mixing up welfare and rights.
Okay, so I think that a lot of vegans hate Donald Trump for some reason. And as opposed to just hating Donald Trump, we should focus on all of the things that he's done well for animal rights and animal welfare, and try and encourage him to do more and more and more if he wins the next election.
Yes, encourage him to do more and more and more.
I don't know really what he did in terms of. I mean, the major problem with Trump. I mean, it's a problem with all governments all around the world, but some worse than others. And the major way in which Trump is actually worse than Biden is with him, with regard to the climate crisis. The fact that measures to combat the climate crisis have been removed by Trump. It's all for what was it? Drill baby drill. That's his.
Yeah, drill baby. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Well, that we have billions of animals, our fellow animals, already perishing because of the climate crisis. Look at the forest fires, just as one example. Throughout the world, billions of animals perishing, and that's just one example. There's been all sorts of disruptions to the food supply, the habitats, etc., etc., etc. It's a major, huge problem for our fellow animals, and that is the one area where I think Trump is kind of hugely worse than Biden. Not that Biden was great. There's nowhere near, there's nowhere near the proper efforts have been made to combat the climate crisis. But
Ronnie, that raises the other issue. When these people are talking about the debate, they will characterize Biden as being left-wing or even, militant left. In the same way now, all the Trump people are claiming that there are rogue and left militant and even communist judges now, because some judges who are constitutional judges are standing in the way of doing these things that Trump want to do, like move people to concentration camps and all that kind of stuff. And so they're being characterized as extreme left, in the same way as that in the movement, me and you are characterized as extreme left wing.
Well, I'd first of all like to know how people define that, to be quite honest, because there's a lot of confusion over what actually constitutes left wing. That's the first thing. But secondly, Biden isn't left wing; he's right wing. Like the Labour Party is a right wing. They're a right wing party. They're right of centre.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So
Biden is right of centre. It's just that Trump is further to the right. These are both the Democrats and the Republicans are right wing parties, the same as both the Labour Party and the Conservatives are left wing parties, are right wing parties. And I'd say that the only real, actual party in the UK Parliament as left wing is the Green Party.
Yeah, and another technical issue on this is that when you do get involved with left and right, and I know that these issues are problematic nowadays, but we're talking not about what people vote for, but the values that they hold, right? So that's the issue, that
Yes.
you've got some values which are usually associated with the left, you know, and they tend to be rights and equality, those kind of things. Some values usually associated with the right, like borders and, you know, kind of being very heavy on immigration,
warfare, military,
warfare, all those type of things. So it's not about what you vote for. Whereas in the discourse that I've seen about all these people saying vote for Trump, it is, well, Biden's just as bad. Well, we'd agree with that, but we wouldn't characterize him as left.
I think like the difference between in terms of the type of administration we would like to see, and the type of society we'd like to see, a type of world we would like to see, like what I would call an animal liberationist society, where, you know, where there is like universal justice, universal freedom from oppression and exploitation for, you know, both our fellow animals and for humans. They're light years, both Trump, Biden, you know, the Labour Party, the Conservatives, they're light years away from that. And in that, looking at it from that distance, there is very little difference between them. The difference between them is actually like kind of really quite minor. There is a difference, but it's really quite minor in the scheme of things from what our political position would be.
Yeah, okay, I accept that, but it does skew. It certainly skews the thing. So here's the last video. Although I've got a surprise one, which is about 20 seconds long for you, Ronnie. So the first bit of this is Cranky Vegan, and he cites Wayne Sean from DXE, which I think a lot of people tuning into this show will be quite shocked by what he says, and then it switches to them talking about the El Salvadorian concentration camp, that they're sending people with no due process. And so they've already found that there's a couple of people there who shouldn't be there, and there's bound to be loads more. I mean, 80 to a cell. That, you know, I don't know if you've seen the videos when they're taken off the plane, they're bent double, and they immediately got to kneel down, and they have all the heads shaved and all this kind of stuff. Now, the guys that have been in there and they're now being proved innocent, the Trump administration is saying that they can't get them back, or they won't get them back. So it's just collateral damage as far as they're concerned. So the reason that I put these two together is these claims that the Trump administration is going to be good for our fellow animals. And, you know, the reality of what the Trump administration is doing to human beings, and then listen for the reason why the person was chosen for the job. So here we go.
Signed an order to immediately expand American timber production. He's authorizing an upwards of 250 to 280 million acres of national forest and protected public lands to be logged. You know, back when part of the vegan community was trying to persuade us that Trump will be actually good for the animals.
It might surprise you to hear this, but I actually think that Trump 2.0 also has a chance of ending up being the most vegan-friendly administration in history.
I made a video in part about how he will declare this an emergency in order to bypass the Endangered Species Act and just start chopping down all the forests. Well, several tariff fights later with Canada over lumber and more, he's doing that now. Just planning on chopping it all down. So
standing there straight, shaved heads, no shirts, stacked high, obviously posing.
Yeah.
For Kristi Noem. Can you give me some background on that? Because that was such a jarring, disturbing image, and something that I don't think I've ever seen in American government.
Yeah, I think that deserved more attention this week. I'm glad you brought that up. That's when, just this week, actually just 2 days ago, Kristi Noem, Secretary of Homeland Security, went to El Salvador's CCOT prison, where they just sent over 200 people that the administration says is tied to the gang Tren de Aragua. Right. Although, as we've heard in circuit court, it was very hard for them to prove those connections, but they used the Alien Enemies Act to do it anyway. I think what you saw there, though, really gets us outside of this back and forth about what's going on with Trump in the courts, and it shows the reality of that prison and people who were sent there without due process in our country. She's standing in front of these men, as you see there, many of them shirtless. They put 80 men in those cells for 23 and a half hours a day. They sleep like that. There's no individual beds. They're not allowed to talk. There are no mattresses, sheets. We've heard about some pretty disturbing, it's notorious for human rights abuses. I won't get into all of those details. She's seen there to show how tough she is on this. And of course, it's one of the reasons why Trump picked her. Many people thought it would be Chad Wolf. He picked her mainly for the reason that she wrote in her memoir that she shot her dog, who was untrainable. Trump likes her toughness, and she wants to put that toughness on display.
So he cares so much about our fellow animals, he appointed someone who shot their dog.
Yeah, but I mean, why would anybody be impressed by that? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh.
And going back to the the felling of these forests, those are the habitats of free living beings, of our fellow animals. Now, they're going to perish because their habitat's been destroyed. That's the first thing. And secondly, those forests, are very important for drawing carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. So felling them is going to contribute towards the climate crisis, and which, in turn, as I've said already, is already killing billions of non-human animals. So in two ways, that felling of the forests is harmful. It's harmful to our fellow animals, and that's something that Trump has had no hesitation in doing.
No, and I don't know the maths on this, Ronnie, but the reason for them opening up the timber market in the States is because of this big dispute with Canada. Now, Trump wants to make Canada the 51st state. Canada's not having any of it. So now you've got these tariffs which are worldwide now, but they were aimed at Canada first, along with Mexico, and so what happens now is that Canada switches the market to Europe and Asia, China, this kind of thing, and then the idea is for the US to produce their own market. Trump wants a US market in everything, right? what was that phrase you were talking about? Baby dig thing.
Drill.
Oh, yeah, drill. Yeah. So that's about oil. Yeah. And so that means that in this part of the world now, you've got two major producers of lumber, which are creating the issues that you've just talked about.
I mean, obviously, while there's a demand for wood, it's got to be supplied from somewhere. But some sources of wood are in greater need of protection than others. In like old forest, for instance, would be a more desirable habitat for our fellow animals than forest that's been grown specifically for the timber market, and where it's younger forest that's felled, so you don't get the same type of habitat there. But the answer to this, we've got to tackle demand. We've got to tackle we've got to tackle greed. We've got to tackle consumerism, because it's because of consumerism that there's this demand for these timber products, and we have to tackle demand, and of course, no sort of pro-capitalist, pro-neoliberal government as we see throughout the world is kind of going to really do that, because it's all based on let's increase the gross national product. We want growth all the time. So we need, therefore, to create more stuff, sell more stuff, produce more stuff. When in fact, the interests of our fellow animals and their proper protection and the proper accordance of the, right, proper respect for their rights would mean we have to reduce that. We have to massively cut back on our impact on the natural world. And so that's, and that's a universal problem that's got to be addressed, whatever the administrations we have at the moment.
Yeah, and I don't think I'd be trusting Trump to differentiate between old forest and
no. It's because they've got that, and so maybe you know, the wood from Canada. I don't know what type of forest that comes from, but of course he's not going to care. He's not going to look into the environmental sort of consequences of that at all.
This is interesting from Joanna. I don't actually know about this, and I confess that I didn't actually think that it could have been a sarcastic comment, but I don't think it was, but I don't know. So maybe, does anybody in the chat know whether this was clarified, that he might have just been, as it were, being satirical?
I've read stuff from Wayne that hasn't gone as far as that, but has kind of, you know, kind of talked about ways in which he thought Trump might be good for our fellow animals. I have seen there has been stuff from him that said that, but it's
apart from the clip that we showed.
Yeah, but it's but it's a very kind of it's very naive looking at things. It's these people don't look at anything in any depth. They don't look at anything in any depth. They're looking at kind of stuff that's kind of very small in terms of the difference it would actually really make. You know, welfare stuff, for instance. You know, and kind of, you know, clutching at straws with these politicians. Oh, you know, they might do this, they might do that. These are all tiny things in relation to the problem that we face, or really the problem that our fellow animals face in various ways across the board.
I tell you one thing, Ronnie, I'd be interested in your view about this. I mentioned in my opening statement, as it were, that the people who would talk about all this for a few years, they're pretty quiet now, and you don't see them posting much. And I just wonder whether what Trump has done in the last 2 months have actually kind of taken them by surprise, kind of shown them that they were totally wrong.
I don't know how it could have taken them by surprise. There's masses of evidence that he was going to do exactly what he's done. You know, he doesn't care about the environment. He doesn't care about he doesn't care about like combating the climate crisis. So
he doesn't care about lying either, because I mean that's one thing that everybody says is that he openly lies over and over again, and that when they do those fact checks, it comes out you know, something like, I think it's about 3,500 lies in the first Trump administration.
So how anyone would be surprised at what's happened? And I think mainly it's probably been the attacks that he's made on free living beings, or on the habitat of free living beings. I think there's some you've got some articles there about that, I think.
Yeah, we'll get onto that. You pick the one that we want to go to next, but I've got this little bonus thing for you, Ronnie. You haven't seen this. Just a bit of fun to lighten the mood.
Local climate action innovation.
Vegan.
In Zambia.
The vegan baby. My guy don't even know how to stay vegan. He's vegan.
Vegans who vegans. Public procurement in Serbia.
Yeah, so there was a famous bit where he was talking, because he met somebody who had a vegan restaurant or something.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I mean, I've been called a vegan, but I was called a Vulcan once, referred to as a Vulcan.
Well, you haven't got the ears for it.
Although I think they were vegan, weren't they, the Vulcans?
Yeah, they're supposed to be.
Yeah, so
can you do that thing with your hand?
No, I can't. Well, I can if I do it like that. With
Hands,
I can't do it. No. Go.
Yeah, I had a nice meal with friends the other day, and we were talking about the. Some people find that very difficult, don't they?
Yeah, Mr. Spock, isn't it? Or Mr. Spock.
Well, it's all the Vulcans.
Oh, well, they all do it. Yeah, but he was the main one, wasn't he? On there.
They're all at it. So where are we going now, then, Ronnie?
Well, yeah, there are some articles. I'll just see. There's the one about, and of course, one big thing, and there's not an article on it. It's a border wall. You know, this border wall he wants to erect. You know, on the border with Mexico.
Yeah,
that cuts off movement of our fellow animals, because they're not like stupid like humans. They don't have borders and that we have between, you know, falsely created nation states, you know, that were created by violence and shouldn't exist. they don't recognise that. They move freely from one, from one sort of nation state to another, don't they? And that's part of how they survive, how they live. Well, this border war is going to stop that, stop the movement of these free living beings, and it's going to seriously, disrupt their lives. And
what about the disruption created by renaming the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America? I mean, there's bound to be loads of fishers and whales and dolphins who won't want to swim around in the Gulf of America.
I know. Well, there's one here. There's an AWI Online press release.
Give us a title.
It's about President Trump's day one actions will decimate wildlife habitat. That one. Bring that one up.
Oh, that one there. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I was just about to say, blimey, I haven't got it, but I do. Yeah. Okay. Grand. Right. All right. Let me see if I can do this. Oh, hang on. I've got to get rid of this one first. Right. Now it should come up. Right. So this is the one. I'll just make it bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you want to say about this one then, Ronnie?
Well, it's just that from day one he started doing this. It's like straight away. He signed multiple executive orders designed to advance policies that are disastrous to wildlife and their habitats. And this is AWI Online, which is the Animal Welfare Institute. So Animal Welfare Institute, obviously not a radical organisation with that name, but this is what they're saying. And the orders expand oil and gas drilling, mining and logging, undermine bedrock environmental laws, and withdraw the United States from important international climate agreements. If fully implemented, the orders will exacerbate the climate crisis and erode critical protections for America's public lands and waters. And invoke the National Emergency Act to do it. One of these things that give him these executive powers. So this was day one. He's already attacking, harming our fellow animals on day one of his administration, and it's continued like that ever since.
Yeah, and presumably because of these kind of trade wars, it's bound to get worse, because the idea, the kind of ethos, is to produce everything that the USA needs inside the USA, right? And so they'll be busy making all these factories, car factories and all that.
It's all this, and we have to live more simply. I mean, Gandhi, excellent saying from Mahatma Gandhi, live simply so that others may simply live. And in most cases, those others, that's others in terms of both humans and our fellow animals, particularly our fellow animals. We have massively too great, humans have massively too great an impact on this planet in all sorts of ways. And one of it is consumerism. We've got to start consuming less, producing less, living more simply, have more sharing rather than everyone wanting their own this and their own that and their own the other, because that all impacts on the natural world and on our fellow animals. And this is something that a lot of vegans don't realize, don't understand, don't think of as being part of veganism. But it's a massively, massively important part of being a vegan is to do our best to reduce our consumption, to reduce our impact on the natural world in all sorts of various ways. And this
paragraph here is
of this.
It's pretty bad, isn't it?
Yeah. What's that bit one?
Said another Trump orders reverses the previous administration's commitment to conserve 30% of the nation's land and waters.
Yeah. See, but so and the problem is that a lot of people consider themselves vegan, don't take any of this on board as being part of veganism, but it's kind of vitally part of veganism. Adverse human impact on the natural world is probably the second worst form of the oppression of our fellow animals that exists on the planet. I'd say the worst way in which humans impact on our fellow animals is through the consumption of animal products, because that also causes massive environmental destruction as well. It kind of kills animals twice. So I'd say that's the biggest area. But second to that, it's our impact on the natural world in various ways, through our overpopulation, through transport, through industrialization.
Do you understand the argument, Ronnie? I mean, I don't really understand the rationale of claiming that veganism has got nothing to do with environmental issues. For example, you've been using the phrase natural world. I mean, you could use the phrase the habitat of free living beings.
Yeah, the natural world is the habitat of free living beings. It is. It's their habitat, and it's their lives. If you destroy their habitat, destroy their food sources, destroy them directly. If you fell forests, you're going to kill animals directly. Kill a large number of our fellow animals directly as well. And yet, this is and you'll get for instance, we know the harm to the environment caused by aviation. We know that a major contributor to the climate crisis is the aviation industry. But look at the number of vegans that will fly halfway around the world on holiday when they don't need to. There's lovely places just down the road. Why do you have to do something that so negatively impacts on ultimately on the habitat and lives of our fellow animals? That's
what about those carbon neutral things that they're working on?
Yeah, but a lot of that is a lot of that's dodgy. But just don't. The best way is don't do it. You don't need to do it. You know what I mean? You don't need. You know why? And so many vegans don't. They'll be great campaigners for the animals in other ways, but they'll jet off halfway around the world. You don't need to. It's about doing our best, isn't it? Not to kind of, negatively impact our fellow animals, and that isn't doing that, is it?
Look at this from Evelina. This I'd forgotten about this. He I think it might have been on Joe Rogan. Musk said that the biggest human weakness is empathy. Well, I mean that is one of the most central of vegan values.
Absolutely. And I think what Evelina said before, you put up a comment from her just now, previous comment. I thought that was
that one there.
Let's go back. Yeah, I think that's true. And what's the answer to it? To me, the answer to it, like the answer to pretty much everything.
Yeah, all together, folks.
Well, it's vegan outreach, isn't it? If we ever want to create an administration that's going to properly protect our fellow animals, that's going to bring about animal liberation, to bring about an animal liberationist society, that isn't going to happen unless we create a lot more vegans. We don't have to turn everyone vegan, but I'd say we have to turn a substantial minority of people vegan. So that we change the culture of society, we change the politics. Because how are we ever going to get a decent administration when the vast majority of people aren't vegan, when the vast majority of people don't believe in animal liberation? How are we going to get an administration that actually is going to take measures to bring that about?
Yeah, because, you're entirely true. But I mean, obviously, it raises the issue we talked about on Sunday with our TikTok thing. Like, your thing about we need vegan education everywhere and all the time. I totally agree with that. And yet it's so frustrating that vegan activists will often get diverted away to do non-vegan things, which I just never understand. Why would they do that? It's almost as though, well, my attitude almost is that, on the grounds that we don't have many vegan activists, if you are one, then you almost should be too busy to get dragged into single issues and welfare and stuff.
I mean, I agree. I mean, I focus really pretty much entirely on vegan outreach, because for two reasons. I think it's the way, we're swimming in a sea of the oppression of our fellow animals, aren't we? It's everywhere. So how do you make the most impact in kind of ending that, or at least reducing it, I suppose, the most effectively, both in the short term and in the long term. And every time, to me, it's vegan outreach, because first of all, every person you educate to become vegan, that's that reduces the demand for our fellow animals to be exploited and killed. And secondly, in the long term, we want to turn to the culture and the politics. The more vegans we have, the more vegan politicians we'll have, and the more vegans we'll have to vote them into office, so they can make the right sort of decisions to bring about animal liberation.
Yeah,
So
but
both
the first step has got to be, hasn't it, Ronnie? The first step has got to be that vegans should do the vegan stuff.
Yes.
I think what's going on, and I've argued this for about 15 years now, is that if you think about, because I got a slideshow about this, and if you think about the words reducitarian, vegetarian, vegan, well, vegetarian is longer than vegan, and reducitarian is longer than the others, and that represents the amount of people, right? But the people who are reducitarians and vegetarians recognize that if you think about the category of animal activists, you talk about vegans, which is why they're always trying to get the vegans to do the non-vegan stuff, and we shouldn't do it. We should stick with veganism.
And it's like all this resources in terms of energy, in terms of money, in terms of time of vegans is being put into stuff that kind of isn't promoting veganism.
Doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. No, it doesn't make sense. And so, we need several things to happen. I mean, first of all, we need far more vegans to become activists, and in promoting veganism. And second, we need far more activists to become kind of organisers. We've got a lot of people who kind of, will join in with what someone else has organised, and very often, they have to travel some miles to do that, and yet where those people live, people all around them are not vegan. So I would encourage, all vegans to become activists, all vegans to do their utmost to spread the vegan message, and all activists to become instigators and organisers of outreach in their own local areas.
And don't get diverted, whatever you do.
Yeah, and don't get diverted into doing non-vegan things. Yeah, absolutely.
I've always been a bit flabbergasted by that. The fact that, I mean, I've been told that vegans have got to do animal welfare because the animal welfareists are not very good at it. But I mean, I don't buy that at all. That argument.
No, the welfare will come anyway. If you're attacking in the industries of animal oppression, they're under attack. An abolitionist attack, which is the only attack there should be. That this exploitation of our other animals needs to be abolished. Those industries aren't going to abolish themselves. So what they'll do is try to placate people by bringing in welfare measures. So campaigns for abolition will bring in welfare. We don't need to campaign for welfare. Those industries will desperately bring in welfare measures to try to survive. So none of us need to campaign for welfare. We campaign for abolition. We stick steadfastly to that.
Yeah, going back to Carolyn's question, this is actually quite worrying, because obviously a lot of people have said that what's going on in the States now is kind of following a well-trodden road that started off in the 30s in Europe and all the rest of it. And a lot of the things that are happening and did happen then are happening now, with the mustache man and all the rest of it. I got told off by Andy, didn't I, for using his real name. And
well, as long as people don't think you're talking about Charlie Chaplin.
Yeah. I'm talking
it was
about
very much better and personally and politically than the other mustache man, of course.
But now this is related to something that you wanted to talk about, which was the vivisection animal research thing. But just to stick with this for a moment, this is true, because there are a lot of academics now who are leaving the USA and going to Europe in particular, but that will also apply to researchers. Now, I know that's a double-edged sword from a vegan point of view. Right?
What's happened is you've got DOGE, Department of Government, what is it, Government something or other, the one that efficiency. What they're doing is they got this, we're going to cut waste, and basically they're talking about public spending. It's spending by the government. We're going to cut, this spending by the government, and the reason for that is because they don't want to tax the rich, of course, and the more public spending that you cut, that's less that the rich have to pay for, isn't it? It's the same here. They'd rather kind of cut the benefits to people with disabilities than tax the rich and do things like scrapping Trident and HS2 and stuff. They'd rather, come down on someone in a wheelchair. But anyway,
going back to the question of empathy, Ronnie, I don't actually understand that part of human psychology, because Trump's cabinet is made up almost exclusively of millionaires and billionaires. Now, when do you have enough that you can then say, well, no, don't give me a tax break. Give it to the poorer people.
Well, there are some rich people over here that are campaigning along those lines. For Brian Eno, for instance, saying, I should be taxed more, and wealthy people should be taxed more. We should pay our share.
But even then, it's a very modest thing, because apparently it's for people who have got, 2 million
it's
already.
Like people that are hugely wealthy.
Yeah.
But these countries are massive welfare. Everyone could be looked after properly. If we concentrate on the essentials that people actually need. What do you need? You need a roof over your head. You need energy. You need heating. You need decent food, water. You need decent healthcare. All these things should be supplied for people. They shouldn't be the subject of speculation, of private enterprise. These are the basic necessities of life. Right, and nobody should go short of that. And the task of the administration, the task of the government, should be to care for the people. But no, they don't. They care for big business against the people, and that's the problem. This is neoliberalism, isn't it? This is what's happened. It's the rule of the market.
Worrying. Here's one, Ronnie. I mean, this is very close to my heart, because I used to teach kind of neo-Marxist and Frankfurt School and all that. And I do have the slight hope, with the piling up failures and the effect on the working class, at least there will be some disillusionment. And second, if this is suggesting that there might be a kind of class rebellion, I'm not sure about that.
I kind of have my doubts about that. I have my doubts about that. To me, the answer is vegan education. We have to change the mindset of a considerable number of ordinary people, so that they are opposed to, all exploitation and oppression. And I mean, with the emphasis on the human exploitation and oppression of our fellow animals, because that is absolutely so massive. We are we're an occupying force, our species on this planet, that has occupied everywhere and has persecuted the beings whose lands we have occupied. And so that is the priority of our species, is to end that, is to withdraw to what I would call pre-invasion boundaries, which means we have to reduce our impact on other animals in a variety of different ways. And I would say that probably the most pressing one is to end our consumption of animal products, because, in terms of numbers, both of animals directly affected by it and the free living beings that are affected by the environmental harm it causes, that's the very worst thing humans do.
Okay, I got a feeling then that you would kind of marry in with certainly the analysis of someone like Herbert Marcuse, because basically he was saying that the working class as a revolutionary agent, let's say, has been bought off, and so there's a few trinkets being thrown down from the top table, and that's been enough, Netflix and all the rest of it. And
Love Island.
And so therefore it's the social movements who would become the new agents of change.
I agree. I agree with that.
At the end of his life, this is 1979, he was looking at the feminist movement, the what he called the ecology movement at the time, which we would now call environmentalism, and that kind of stuff. The thing that worries me about that is that it seems like a lot of people in our movement reject the idea that they're in a social movement, and that might feed back to neoliberalism.
Well, you see, I think it's a shallow view of things. In other words, if our neoliberal system can provide, these vegan-friendly products that everyone can consume, then that's brilliant. That's job done. But that's ignoring the actual harm done by consumption, isn't it? We have to kind of actually reduce.
It's a hard sell, Ronnie, even within the vegan movement, right?
Yeah. And I think that's the problem. That isn't it brilliant that you've got a company like Fray Bentos, horrendous oppressors and exploiters are our fellow animals. They're huge slaughter factories. Oh, great! Isn't it wonderful? They've produced a vegan-friendly pie. Isn't that great? And yeah, I suppose it's better that they produced a vegan-friendly pie than that they've not produced a vegan-friendly pie. But that's about as far as it goes. You see, and so we should be, there, and in order to achieve animal liberation, we've got to kind of go much further and deeper than that.
Yeah. So do we, because we're over the hour, do we want to finish on your thoughts about, because the one area where people have argued that the Trump regime might benefit our fellow animals is animal experimentation, right?
Well, first of all, we've got to look at what's happened is they're basically cutting public spending. That's what it is. And so that's that's government spending. It doesn't affect.
Yeah, but that's part of research, isn't it? That's where,
a lot of government money goes into research in different ways, and so some of that research is animal research. So it means that funding is going to be cut to certain animal research. Publicly funded animal research as part of a whole. Wholesale cuts. And there's already been a threat by scientists in the USA that they're going to leave the USA and go to Europe and carry on, and kind of carry on there. But what I'd say about that is, of course, they would need to be funded. You get someone, say, in the USA as a vivisector. He can no longer be a vivisector, or she can no longer be a vivisector in the USA because their funding's been cut. So they think, I'll go to Europe and be a vivisector over there. But whether they're being the vivisector in Europe, once again, depends on funding and depends on there being funding in Europe to pay for their vivisection, doesn't it? So there is some doubt over, I'd be willing to accept that this may lead to overall to fewer animal experiments. That could be what kind of happens in the scheme of things.
Well, there's no guarantee about it.
There's no guarantee
even increase them, isn't it?
We're talking about global industry. Animal experimentation is a global industry. These companies, but what you're talking about is like state-funded research. So you're talking more about like. You're not talking about like your contract testing laboratories we have over here, where private companies are paying to have products tested. This is sort of university research. This is research that the state pays for that's being cut. The private stuff's not going to be cut.
It could increase it, Ronnie, because, for example, there's a lot of talk now because the idea is for everything to be made in the USA. There's even memes going around now of kind of US workers kind of putting together iPhones and the kind of stuff that is normally not done. It's all going to be done there. So toxicology tests are going to be needed.
Yeah, I think a lot of toxicology is like privately. It's paid for.
Yeah, but there's also different rules and regulations, which is why there's that big thing about the tariffs, isn't it? About the chlorinated chicken and all that kind of stuff.
But what I'd say is, like, even if this led to some overall, because you're talking about worldwide, is this going to worldwide in totality lead to reduction in animal experiments? And the answer is, well, maybe it could. It's not certain. Maybe it could. But the thing is, this is compared with all the harm that Trump is doing to our fellow animals in other ways, that's only small. All right, it's not small for the animals that may be spared because of it, but in terms of say all the animals that are perishing because of harm done to their habitat, or the ones that are perishing because of the climate crisis, the number that are used, we have 200 million experiments on animals worldwide. I would say there's different estimates, but I'd say that's probably what it is. That is, compared to the number of animals that perish because of adverse human impact on the natural world, climate crisis, the destruction of the habitat of free living beings. That 100 million is like, there was several billion animals killed in the forest fires in Australia, wasn't there? They did some research into numbers.
Oh, they're all the Greece ones that Nella
and all
was
that.
involved
You see,
in,
this is like, so. We're talking about a possible gain in a certain area of the oppression of other animals, possible gain for animals. So you've got to weigh that against the huge losses in other areas.
And it's not a guaranteed gain either.
It's not a guaranteed gain, no.
This one actually is something you talked about this before we came on air, whether will it be a push towards the non-animal?
Well, no. You see, they're not going to refund non-animal research because they're cutting funding. They're not going to say, right, we won't fund animal research, but we'll.
Yeah, so that's what I mean. So it's not even animal welfare. It's not even ideology. It's about money. Yeah.
Stop doing the tests on animals. We'll fund you to do non-animal tests, which would be obviously much better. Those researchers, those vivisectors wouldn't go elsewhere to ply their trade, would they? If they had the money to, to do non. But that isn't what's happening.
No, but I tell you what could be a benefit is for them to really focus on whether the so-called alternatives are cheaper than using our fellow animals. In order that they could still function with a
that would be better. I think I think it's one of these things that initially they're more expensive, but as they become developed and more widespread, then they're cheaper. I think that's probably how it works with those things. So you've got to think a bit long term in it, and governments aren't great at that, are they? Thinking long term.
Government's not great at doing anything really, but
no, they don't.
Is there anything you want to sling on the screen before we go, Ronnie? Is there any more of those that you just to get you scurrying to your list?
Yeah, well, there's the one there's the one about the because my overriding this interestingly enough. This article deals with kind of several issues. It's this one from the Times of Israel.
What's the title?
It's blogs.timesofisrael.com. The uncertain road ahead for animals in Trump's America.
Yeah, got that. Okay.
Yeah, pop that up because that's got a few things on.
Right, here we go. This one, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me where are we? Let me make it a bit bigger. People can see it. Right. Okay.
And this was written in December, so not long after. It talks about Trump's first term and says that his regulatory changes severely undermine both environmental protections and animal welfare standards. The US Department of Agriculture shifted towards a pro-corporate agriculture stance, easing restrictions on industrial farming practices and reducing oversight of humane slaughter laws. So, I mean, it's welfarist, isn't it? But still a bad thing. It says that the Trump's presidency prioritized dairy and meat industries and enacted policies that bolstered industrial farming.
Despite the growing popularity of plant-based diets, eh?
Yeah. And on top of this, large-scale farming operations disproportionately benefited from trade-related subsidies. I mean, this is
here's a question that's related to what Carolyn said. Is presumably we can look forward to draconian kind of ag-gag type legislation.
Well, yes, you see, so the difficulty, there's going to be an increased difficulty for activists in opposing these things.
Yeah.
That's the thing, you know, in doing investigations into places, exposing what's going on and all that. I mean, you've already got that already exists in the USA. There's already a prohibition in a few states, and that's likely to get worse, I would say, on kind of cell culture for producing meat, for instance. Whether that applies to other forms of, for instance, bacterial fermentation and stuff like that, whether that would also apply to that, I kind of don't know. But you see, it's once again, pro the so-called livestock industries, isn't it? It's pro animal farming. That was like what happened in his first term. And I
mean, if this paragraph is true, where do Sean and all these other people get the idea that they're interested? What's next for animal welfare?
I honestly don't know. Oh. I honestly don't know. And if people think this is a kind of progressive and sort of radical publication, we talk about the Times of Israel.
Yeah, I mean, it's saying the prospect for animal welfare advocates.
Yeah, it's animal welfare. Yeah. But a lot of the things everyone's talking about.
This is not veganism even.
Not veganism even. No. And so the argument's very much been about animal welfare, hasn't it? It's been about, Trump will be better for animal welfare, and oh no, he won't be better for animal welfare. It's all been spoken about within the welfare paradigm, hasn't it? On kind of both sides, really.
And one thing we haven't talked about is the fact that because it became a big thing during the campaign, Trump denied that he even knew what Project 2025 was. And now it would seem that they're almost like following it like a Bible. And again, part of that is a plan that aims to undo progressive animal welfare reforms, such as they are. So even the kind of stuff that's in existence is going to be under threat.
Yes, yeah. So you kind of based on his first term, then the prospects aren't great, and this is kind of basically what that arc.
No, but this is the second term, because this is the Project 25.
This is
25
second term. Yeah. And then there is the one about the climate, which is the Guardian article. Whether you want to, I've already talked a lot about that anyway.
Probably no need then, really.
No, there's no need. No need to do that. But so how anyone can think, but the Trump administration is a bit of benefit to our fellow animals, I find that that's.
Yeah, have you seen the last paragraph? For those working to protect animals, Trump's return to power serves as a reminder of the uphill battle ahead. This article, as you said, it's not exactly a radical publication, is saying that things are going to get worse. So where the optimism about things?
I understand. You see, what I think it is there's an accusation, isn't there, like that kind of, people on the left kind of put human interests above the interests of our fellow animals, for instance. There's often that allegation, isn't there? But you see, where people have all these right-wing views and claim also to be vegan, my suspicion is that they're actually putting their right-wing views ahead of veganism. In other words, that they're people who maybe had those views already. They kind of become vegan, or according to their idea.
But we had that on video, Ronnie, because the guy was saying that conservatives have always been interested in animal welfare. Well, yeah, but that's not veganism anyway.
No, it's not. No, it's not. And whether they've really, how many conservatives really have been I mean, it's interesting, really, because I did a series of videos with Wenda Shahata, who runs an animal sanctuary over here, Huglitz Wood, on various issues related to veganism. And one of the things we covered was, remember Sir David Amos, who was tragically stabbed to death, wasn't he? Do you remember if he was a Tory member of Parliament?
Oh, in his constituency or something.
His constituency, he was killed in the Southend.
Yeah,
and he was lauded by the RSPCA and other, other campaigners, other animal welfare campaigners, as being, he was an absolutely brilliant force for animals, and it's such a tragedy that he's been killed and all that. Yeah, it was a tragedy. He was killed. Terrible thing to happen. But when you kind of examined and he was a Conservative member of Parliament, when you actually examined his voting record, what he voted for was incredibly harmful to our fellow animals.
Yeah, I've heard you say
he
this
voted
before,
against measures to combat the climate crisis. He voted for like the HS2 railway, which has been devastating to the habitat of free living beings and continues to be so in its construction. He voted in favour of as did most members of Parliament, in favour of the UK's retention of nuclear weapons, which, who would be the biggest victim by far of if one of these weapons was detonated? It'd be our fellow animals, wouldn't it? They'd be the ones that suffered even more than humans, etc., etc., etc. That when you kind of actually looked, he was lauded as this great guy.
Yeah, but what was he lauded for then? I mean, you haven't. I mean, what did people think he was good at?
Welfare stuff. He brought in a law to sort of protect horses from being beaten or something, and he was opposed to animal experimentation, and very anti-hunting. He was involved in campaigns against hunting, against the fur trade and these single issues, and a lot of those things he was abolitionist on. But actually, when you look at his voting records and what he actually stood for, it was incredibly harmful to our fellow animals. See, people look at the little things and they don't look at the big things. Look at all these little things that people have done in terms of the overall picture of what happens to our fellow animals. They think, oh, great, they did this and they did that and they did that. But you look at the big picture of what that person actually stood for, and it's completely different.
Yeah, and also when we're talking about politicians, we've got that general understanding that I think we both share, which is that they're not leaders, they're followers, and so cultural change has got to be first.
Culture change has got to be first, and the only way we achieve the proper sort of cultural change is by educating a lot more people to become vegan, and that means a lot more vegans have got to become involved in outreach. A lot more, of those people involved in outreach actually have to become organisers, instigators of the outreach themselves.
Yeah, that's kind of got to be our first job, isn't it? So
yeah, absolutely,
we're kind of jumping the gun if we can think we can go to politics at the moment. Well, we're two species.
Yes, I mean, I was very involved with the Green Party, and as I said, I helped to bring about some of their improvement of their policies on animal protection. But even the Green Party, they're a human supremacist party, like all the others. That they've got these, really very good policies on animal protection, far better than the other parties, but they give them no priority. You don't ever hear about them. They're totally focused on humans and human issues. When the most important issue of all, in terms of slaughter and suffering, is what humans do to other animals. That is the first priority of our species to tackle. And yet, despite them being this radical left-wing party, they don't do that. And so I came to the conclusion that the only way you kind of change that is by educating more people to become vegan. Because while we have so few vegans comparatively, we're never going to change that. We're never going to, shift that focus. And so that's why I've kind of gone. I've started to approach things at a deeper level, which is vegan outreach.
Yeah. So all the people pointing fingers at so-called intersectional vegans on the left, their fingers should be pointed at politics in general, no matter what.
Yeah, well, it's this thing. Like I kind of used this phrase before. I've talked about the suprematrix, and what that is like a lot of people seen the film The Matrix, where there was this people lived in a totally false reality and were going about their everyday business, the sad things, the happy things, and everything in this kind of fake reality. And that's how the world is. That there's this fake reality of this kind of, human issues and how we live our lives in society in almost total ignorance in terms of not considering what our species has done and continues to do to our fellow animals. It's horrendous. There's this tremendous horror going on all the time. Like whatever happens, whoever wins the US presidential election, whoever wins the general election in the UK, all these things that are going on in the world, politics and that, all the time, the lorries continue to roll to the slaughterhouses, and the trawlers continue to go out to sea, and there's this massacre of our fellow animals going all the time, and no one hardly thinks about it. And that is the thing. It's this false reality. We've got to get people out and live in this false reality, and to appreciate what the true conditions of existence are on this planet is that we've got one species. There's like the Nazis, really, that's kind of this horrendous, oppressor of the others. And we as a species have got to stop that. We've got to kind of radically change our behavior towards our fellow animals. That is the priority for us. It's a priority for all humans, because if we're members of an oppressor species, it is the duty of all humans to do their best to end that oppression. And it's especially really the duty of vegans, because vegans are aware of it. If someone's kind of not aware of it, or kind of doesn't want to be aware of it, but we vegans know about it, which is kind of why we're vegan. And so we should be doing our utmost to end it in terms of outreach, in terms of spreading the vegan message.
Yeah, well, you've done your own party political broadcast there.
As always, it can't be said too many. This can't be said too many times. Is why I'm always saying it. It can't be said too many times. It's the only realistic way forward. Now, it's not an easy. There is no easy road to animal liberation. There's a long road, and there are wrong roads. That's all there is. There's a road we can go down where there is a chance of achieving it at the end of the day, which is through vegan outreach. And it's a long road, and it's not going to be a quick thing. But at least you can see how that would work. You could see how we can get there through that. Whereas other campaigns hit the buffers. We know we're both involved in the ALF, and that achieved a lot. In the end, it hit the buffers. It was crushed by the state. Didn't achieve what was on the tin, animal liberation, and neither could it ever have achieved it, because you're not changing the culture. You're not changing ordinary people.
That's right.
Yeah.
But
there we are.
The vegan said, "Well said, Ronnie." Then appears to have dropped her mic. So there's that. So are we done then? Do you think?
I think I kind of think so. And so if people are, it's like these things are very upsetting to see. I don't watch the news. I have a quick flick through the Guardian app just to see the headlines. I very rarely read any of the stories, just to keep a little bit abreast. I don't watch the news because no point, because I can't change. I can't end the war in Ukraine. I can't stop, Israel bombing Gaza.
Well, the Guardian are not trying to.
Yeah, no, I can't get Trump out of office. I can't do any of those things. I can't do any of those things.
You should go over to the States and give him the length of your tongue, Ronnie.
Give him a good talking to.
Yeah.
Like this. But what I'd say, if somebody says, what is the solution to what's happening in Ukraine? What is the solution to what's happening in Gaza? What is the solution to Trump? My answer to all of them is vegan outreach. It's vegan outreach, because what we can do through vegan outreach is stop it's put an end to a situation which allows those things to happen, so that they kind of don't happen again eventually. If you see what I mean. And that's the problem. The reason we've got Trump, the reason we've got all these terrible governments and these things coming on, is because we've not done that, because we've not focused on education. We've focused on protest, and demonstrations and stuff like that, which very rarely achieve anything. And so we've not focused on education for decades and decades. We've not focused on education. So we've allowed this situation to develop. Trump wasn't imposed from the sky. Starmer wasn't imposed from the sky. Right? Neither was Putin. These people would not be in positions of power without the support of a substantial percentage of the population. Trump was voted in. Starmer was voted in. Right? This is ordinary people voting these people in. So unless we change ordinary people, we're going to carry on forever having people like that, and we're going to carry on forever having Trump and having people like Starmer and having people like Putin. All right, so I don't know. None of these people would be in power without Hitler. Hitler was initially voted in. Like, all right, he became a dictator, but he was voted in initially. It was ordinary people voted for the bloke. So we have to change all the people.
We're getting the same pattern. So, spiritual vegan, give me some credit. I do know that I'm not that old. Trying to make a joke, I dropped the mic joke.
Yeah. So there we are. That's my party political.
That's your party political podcast. Yeah, part 1 and part 2. Right. Okay, well, we'll say goodbye then, folks. Thanks very much for keep staying with us and tuning in, and also the chat's been really good. So we'll have a look at that in case we missed anything, and we shall come back when we've got another.
Come back when we've had a good lie down.
Yeah, when we've had a nap, and
yeah.
on the basis, we'll come back, Ronnie, on the basis that we are
still alive.